Hey there guys, Buddy here. So let's take a look at the secondary sector and how it's all about the processing of these raw materials which were obviously extracted in the primary sector. So firstly, what is the contribution of the secondary sector to the South African economy? Now whenever you're asked this question, there's always three simple answers that you can give to ensure that you get these marks. Firstly, you're going to say it contributes to the GDP. So the secondary sector, which consists of manufacturing, construction and electricity, contributes about 20 to 24% of South Africa's GDP. Now this money will obviously be generated in the form of taxes. Secondly, you're going to say it's going to contribute to foreign exchange, right? So South Africa earns foreign exchange by exporting these manufactured goods. And examples of the manufactured goods that are going to be exported would be cars, wine, fruit juices, and processed metals like steel. Now one thing to keep in mind is that your manufactured exports are obviously going to be worth more than your raw materials, and that's going to in turn help to balance trade. Now when I say we are helping to balance trade, we actually mean that we're going to increase a country's exports, right? Or we're going to decrease its imports. Obviously to improve the difference between what it sells to other countries and what it buys from them. Now when we say we have a positive balance, so that's going to be a surplus, we're actually saying that we're going to export more than we import. And that's going to lead to us bringing in more foreign capital, which will obviously strengthen our currency. Now, a negative balance, which is known as a deficit, is going to occur when your imports are going to be much greater than your exports. So basically, in a nutshell, when we say we are going to balance trade, it means that we're going to increase our exports and decrease our imports. And thirdly, it's going to contribute to job creation. Now, the secondary sector is going to provide millions of jobs, right? Especially in your factories such as textiles, food processing, steel and chemicals. It's going to provide jobs in construction, which is the building of roads, houses, malls and other infrastructure. And it's going to provide jobs in the energy sector, so your Eskom and your power stations. And obviously, job creation is going to reduce unemployment, which will improve the quality of life. So now let's take a quick look at the different types of industries, right? So basically an industry is going to be any factory or a business where your raw materials are going to be turned into products that people can use. So there's going to be 7 different types of industries in South Africa. The first is going to be your heavy industries. And these are your large-scale industries that are going to need lots of capital. So things like money and machinery, right? They're also going to need a lot of energy and raw materials. These heavy industries will be located on the outskirts of settlements and it's going to occupy large areas of land. It's also going to use a lot of raw materials and energy. It's going to produce big, heavy products like steel, iron and chemicals. However, it is going to produce quite a bit of pollution. And something that we also have to remember when it comes to your heavy industries is that these heavy industries are going to produce quite a bit of pollution, right? So things like noise pollution and air pollution, right? And an example of these heavy industries will be engineering, shipbuilding, steel and oil refining. So now let's look at the second type of industry, which is going to be your light industry. Now this is technically going to be the opposite of a heavy industry. So this is going to be a smaller, less energy intensive industry, right? It's going to be located close to your CBD and it's going to occupy your small areas of land, which will produce very little pollution, right? Obviously as compared to your heavy industry. Your light industries are going to make consumer goods, so things that people are going to use on a daily basis. For example, your clothing factories in Durban or your food processing plants. Thirdly, you're going to have your raw material oriented industries. So this industry is going to be located close to raw materials because they are either bulky or heavy to transport. And an example will be Sasol. Now that is your coal to oil industry near coal fields in Mpumalanga. Your fourth type of industry will be your market oriented industry. And that's going to be located close to markets or consumers because your products are perishable, fragile or expensive to transport. Remember, when we're talking about perishable items, we're talking about items that can spoil very quickly. So an example would be your bakeries, your soft drink factories, or your dairies such as cheese or yogurt. Fifth would be your footloose industries. Now these can be set up anywhere because obviously they're not going to depend on any raw materials or heavy transport. That means that the location is not going to be dictated by access to materials or markets. And often these types of industries are going to be technology based or they're going to be service orientated. That means they're going to provide a service, not an actual item. And that means that no pollution is going to be generated. So an example is obviously going to be your IT companies or your call centers. The next type of industry will be your ubiquitous industry. Now this is going to be found everywhere because demand is going to be everywhere. An example will be bottled water, bread, or even printing. And our last type of industry is going to be your bridge or your break of bulk industry. And that's going to be located at places between the source of raw materials and the customer. So an example would be your ship to truck or your rail to road. An example of that would be your oil and sugar refineries. So now let's take a look at the factors that are going to favor industrial development in South Africa. Remember, there's going to be factors that favor, and there's going to be the opposite of that, which is your factors that are going to hinder industrial development. So for factors that are going to favor industrial development, firstly, it's going to be your raw materials. Now, South Africa is going to be rich in minerals. So minerals such as gold, platinum, coal, iron ore, and it's going to have a lot of agricultural products. So it's going to have a variety of fruit and crops. And these are all going to provide inputs for industries like mining, steel, and food processing, right? Now, the West Coast will also have a very well-developed fishing industry. Another factor would be your energy supply, right? Now, energy is going to be a very major factor when it comes to cost. And that's why some industries are going to be located very close to energy sources. Now, Eskom obviously is going to provide electricity, although we know some challenges such as load shedding do exist. Now, your coal reserves are going to supply cheap power for industries. The next factor is going to be water. Now, industries are going to need large amounts of water. Examples are your steel or your chemical industries, because remember, water is going to be used either for the processing of these raw materials or is going to be needed for the cooling of machinery. So basically, these industries need to be located close to your water supply. So things like your rivers, your dams, and your water transfer schemes are going to supply these industrial areas. Now, South Africa has very good and well-established road and rail networks. For example, let's take a look at our ports, right? We have your Durban, which is the busiest port in Africa. You have your Cape Town port, you have your Richards Bay port. So I think there's a total of 8 ports in South Africa, right? And we're going to have your 4 international airports. And all of these are going to support your exports and your imports. Number 5 will be your trade and competition. Now, access to international markets through BRICS, SADC, AGOA. Now, access to local and international markets are going to promote competition and trade. Remember, in South Africa, there's not going to be any barriers to trading. That means that South Africa is going to experience free trade. And we know that competition is going to encourage innovation and efficiency. Now, your 6th factor is going to be labor. Now, South Africa is going to have a large labor force available. Now, that's going to consist of your skilled and your semi-skilled workers. Now, it's also going to consist of your unskilled workers, right? We need to remember that as well. Now, South Africa is also going to have your universities and your colleges, which are going to train workers in specialized fields. Now, our last factor is going to be political or your government support. Now, your government policies are going to encourage industrial growth, especially in your outlying rural areas, and it's going to support local industries. Now, examples of these government supports will be your industrial development zones, so your IDZs, your spatial development initiatives, so your SDIs, and your Black Industrialists program. So now let's take a look at the factors that are going to restrict your industrial development in South Africa. So the first factor is going to be your over-concentration. So industries are going to be concentrated in Gauteng, Durban, Pinetown, and Cape Town. Now this is going to lead to overcrowding, traffic congestion, and another factor would be your high land prices. Remember, the high land prices are going to be due to your demand for the land, and that's going to lead to your lower profits because people are paying so much for these land prices, right? Obviously, another effect of your over-concentration would be pollution. And over-concentration in certain areas will lead to other regions that are going to remain underdeveloped. Your next factor is going to be HIV and AIDS. Now that is going to reduce your productivity because your workers are going to be getting sick or they're going to be dying young, right? And this in turn is going to increase costs for companies because remember, companies are going to be expected to provide healthcare, or they're going to need to spend money training these replacements because the workers that have HIV are going to be getting sick or they're going to be dying young. The third factor is going to be your transport or your distance to foreign markets. Now remember, South Africa is going to be far from your major global markets, right? When we're talking about your major global markets, we're talking about the markets in Europe, Asia, and America. Now that means that South Africa, because it's going to be isolated, the costs for your exports will make it difficult for your local industries to compete with the industries that are going to be closer to these international markets in Europe, Asia, and America. And you're also going to have your high transport costs for exports, which will also reduce competitiveness. Your fourth factor is going to be your labor supply, right? Now, many workers are going to be unskilled, and that's going to affect efficiency. Remember, if a worker is unskilled, he's not going to be able to do the best job that he can, right? There's going to be delays, right? There's going to be a lot of setbacks, and that's going to affect your efficiency. Remember, when we're talking about your labor supply, we're going to have strikes, we're going to have wage demands, and we're going to have low productivity, which is going to discourage investment. Now, remember, when workers start to strike, that strike is going to cause your production delays. Now, your production delays, when it's going to be mixed with your high labor costs, that's going to cause your small businesses to close down. Another factor when it comes to your labor supply is going to be brain drain. So brain drain is going to occur, and this is going to result in skilled workers leaving the country, and then obviously we're going to have to now employ foreigners at much higher costs. Your fifth factor is going to be your cheap imports and your counterfeit goods. Now, your imported products, especially from China, are often going to be cheaper than your local products, right? And your local industries will not be able to compete with these imported goods. Now, your counterfeit goods are going to undercut prices, and it's going to harm your local industries. Now, we know how cheap your fake clothes are going to be, and people will rather go and buy these goods as compared to your locally made goods, and that's going to affect our local industries. Now, our sixth factor will be air pollution. Now, this is going to be caused by your coal burning power stations, by your factories, by your motor vehicles, and by mining. And there are numerous effects of your industrial pollution. So think about how it's going to affect human health. It's going to kill animals and plants. It's going to cause acid rain. Remember, we spoke about acid rain in a video that we did quite a while ago. We spoke how acid rain is going to damage buildings, it's going to kill plants. And your industrial pollution is also going to cause the quality of air to significantly drop, which is going to reduce the overall quality of life. Now, the causes of air pollution can be asked as an essay question, so let's quickly tackle that. So the first cause of air pollution will be obviously your burning of fossil fuels. So think of coal, think of oil, think of gas as well. Now, the burning of these fossil fuels in factories are going to release harmful gases like carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and your nitrogen oxides. Your industrial smoke and emissions from chimneys are going to pollute the air with dust, soot, and chemicals. The use of outdated machinery and lack of filters or scrubbers is going to increase your toxic gas released. The release of greenhouse gases from energy-intensive industries like steel, cement, and chemical production. The lack of rules and policies that control air pollution. Now, this is going to allow industries to bypass laws. Remember, if we put in place rules and regulations that are going to prevent these industries from releasing large amounts of pollution, that's going to be a major factor or major step forward in reducing air pollution. And lastly, open burning of waste materials such as plastics and chemicals are going to add poisonous fumes to the air. Your seventh factor is going to be your water supply. Now, South Africa is going to be a water scarce country. That means that we're not going to receive a lot of rainfall. Now, droughts, pollution, and competition between households, farming, and industry are going to limit water availability. Now, pollution from various industries is often going to be dumped into your usable water. But what are some solutions to our water supply issue? Firstly, it's going to be water recycling and reuse. So industries can treat and reuse wastewater to reduce the freshwater demand. Your desalination plants, so your coastal industries can use seawater as an alternative source of fresh water. But remember, when we're talking about desalination, right, we're talking about removing the salt content from our ocean water, but that is a very expensive process. So I don't think that's very viable for South Africa. Another solution will be your efficient water management. So that's going to be introducing your water saving technologies like closed loop cooling systems in factories. We have your rainwater harvesting, which is collecting and storing rainwater for industrial use. And lastly, we have your government regulations and incentives. Now, this is basically going to be your policies which are going to encourage industries to use water responsibly and invest in sustainable systems. Our eighth and last factor is going to be your raw materials. Now, some resources like your high quality coal or your certain minerals are becoming depleted, right? And therefore there's going to be rising costs to extract your deeper ores. Now, many raw materials are going to be exported instead of processed locally, which is going to reduce your industrial growth. And the use of imported raw materials will obviously increase your production costs. So now let's take a look at the 4 core industrial areas in South Africa, right? So the 4 core industrial areas in South Africa are going to be your PWV, which is your Pretoria Witwatersrand Vereniging. It's going to be your Durban Pinetown, your Southwestern Cape, and your Port Elizabeth Uitenhage. Now, these are basically just going to be your main regions in which your industries are going to be concentrated. So here's a nice simple table just giving you the very basic information about each core industrial area. So please feel free to pause the video and read quickly through it, or take a screenshot and keep it for later. Now, when we're looking at your PWV region in Gauteng, we're going to be looking at the factors that are going to favor industrial location. We're going to be looking at the factors that are going to hinder development, and we're going to be looking at the main industrial activities at each area. So with your factors that are going to be favoring industrial location, firstly, it's going to be market, right? Now, this is going to be your largest urban population in South Africa, and that's going to provide a huge local market. Now, that means that there's going to be a great demand, obviously, for a variety of goods, and they will generally have a higher than average buying power. Next will be your transport. Now, the PWV region is going to have an excellent road, rail, and air connections. It's going to be situated close to your OR Tambo International Airport. In terms of labor, there's going to be a large supply of both your skilled and your unskilled workers. Remember, this region is going to be densely populated. That means there's going to be a lot of people which can provide labor. Next will be your raw materials, right? Now, the PWV region is going to be close to gold, coal, and other mineral resources of the Witwatersrand. So that means that there's going to be an abundance of your raw materials, just like this point mentioned. So things like gold, coal, iron ore, maize, and platinum as well, right? Now, when we're looking at water, now your Vaal River and your dams are going to supply water for industries and households. And this region is going to receive enough rainfall as well. In terms of power, electricity is going to be supplied from nearby coal-fired power stations. So that means that electricity is going to be relatively cheap because your power is going to be transmitted over your short distances. In terms of relief, remember, when we're talking about relief, we're talking about the slope, right? So this area is going to be located on the Highveld. Now that means that it's going to have your flatland. Now your flatland is going to make building and the expansion of industries much easier. Now, when we're looking at the factors that are going to hinder development, first is going to be air pollution, right? Secondly, it's going to be water shortages. Thirdly, it's going to be congestion. The fourth factor will be electricity, which is your load shedding. Fifth will be your high crime rates. And sixth is going to be your distance to the nearest port. Remember, the nearest port is going to be your Durban port. The main industrial activities that are going to take place within your PWV region would be mining-related industries, iron and steel, engineering, chemical industries, finance, and your service industries. Now, when we're looking at your Durban Pinetown region, the factors favoring industrial location would firstly be your market. So again, there's going to be a large local population and your demand from your KwaZulu-Natal and inland provinces. Next would be transport. Remember, this area is going to have a major seaport, which is your Durban Harbour, right? There's going to be good road and rail links. In terms of labor, there's going to be a large supply of semi-skilled and unskilled workers from your surrounding areas. So now, because there's going to be a large population, there's going to be plenty supply of workers. In terms of raw materials, we're going to have a wide range of resources. So things like sugarcane, forestry, dairy, meat, and your imports, obviously, via the port. In terms of water, you're going to have good rainfall because, remember, Durban is situated on the eastern half of the country, which is going to receive high rainfall. And it's going to have many rivers in the region, such as your Tugela River. In terms of power, it's going to receive electricity from Eskom's national grid and your local stations. And when we're talking about your relief, again, your slope, it is going to be hilly terrain, but there's going to be enough space for industries near Pinetown and Durban. The factors that are going to hinder development will be your limited flat land, because remember, KZN is going to have your hilly land. That means it's going to have steep slopes. It's not going to be fully flat land. There's going to be congestion, strikes, and competition from your Gauteng industries. And when you're looking at your main industrial activities, we're going to be looking at things like oil refining. We're going to be looking at sugar processing, chemicals, textiles, motor vehicle assembly, and your ship repair and building. When we're looking at your Southwestern Cape, your factors that are going to be favoring industrial location will firstly be your market. So the Southwestern Cape is going to have a large urban population and a tourist market with a high purchasing power. In terms of transport, it's going to have obviously the Cape Town Harbour, and it's going to have an international airport and a good road network. In terms of labor, again, there's going to be skilled and semi-skilled workers available because of its dense population. In terms of raw material, there's going to be fish, fruit, wine, wheat, and imports via the harbour. In terms of water, you're going to have your dams and rivers which are going to supply water, but it's sometimes going to be limited. So there is going to be a shortage of water in the Western Cape. In terms of power, you're going to get electricity from Eskom. And in terms of relief, you're going to have your flat areas like the Cape Flats, which will be suitable for industries. In terms of your factors hindering development, firstly, it's going to be the distance from your other major markets, right? You're going to have occasional water shortages, and you're going to have your high transport costs inland. There's going to be few mineral resources, and you're going to have expensive power because it's located away from your major coal fields. Now, the main industrial activities taking place in your Southwestern Cape would be food processing, so things like wine, fruit, and fish. There's going to be textiles, clothing, electronics, ship repair, and petrochemicals. And your fourth region will be your Port Elizabeth Uitenhage region. Now, this region is going to be located in your Eastern Cape. So the factors that are going to favor industrial location would firstly be your market, right? So this area is going to have a growing urban population, and it's going to have links to your inland provinces. In terms of transport, it's going to have a good harbour. Remember, Port Elizabeth does have a harbour. It's going to have an airport, and it's going to have rail connections. So that's basically going to link this region to your other places, obviously, in the country. In terms of labor, it's going to have a large supply of unskilled and semi-skilled workers. In terms of raw materials, there's going to be wool, there's going to be fish, citrus, and manganese nearby. In terms of water, your rivers and dams are going to provide the water, and this location is going to be found in the wetter part of the country. In terms of power, again, it's going to receive electricity from the Eskom grid. And in terms of relief, it will have flat land, which obviously will allow for factory construction. Now, when we're looking at your factors that are going to hinder development, we're looking at your high poverty, your labor unrest, and your distance from Gauteng markets. And there's going to be no coal fields, so providing power is going to be an issue. Now, the main industrial activities in this area is going to be your motor vehicle assembly, so VW, Isuzu, etc. You're going to have your textiles, food processing, and chemical industries, and also there's going to be the making of your leather goods. Now, when looking at strategies for industrial development, there's going to be your apartheid strategies, and there's going to be your post-apartheid strategies. So in terms of your apartheid strategies, the first strategy would be your counter-urbanization. So that basically tried to reduce overcrowding in cities by forcing people to move back to the rural areas or your homelands. The Good Hope Plan, now in order to spread wealth in South Africa, the country was divided into 8 major development regions. Tax incentives were provided to encourage industrial growth. We had your deconcentration points, so new industrial towns were developed just outside of major cities to reduce urban growth. And we had your border industry nodes, so industries were located near homeland borders to create jobs and control urbanization. Now, in terms of your post-apartheid strategies, the first strategy will be your Reconstruction and Development Program, so your RDP. Now, this strategy was adopted in 1994, and it was aimed to reduce inequality and provide basic needs like housing, water, and electricity by using the resources available. Now, other claims also included providing jobs, improved facilities such as education and healthcare. However, the RDP strategy was stopped in 1996 due to a lack of money and infrastructure. Your next strategy will be your SDI, so your spatial development initiatives. And this is going to be focused on developing specific areas with high economic potential. The next strategy would be your growth, employment and redistribution, so GEAR. Now this was started in 1996 and it's based on your RDP principles, but it was mainly aimed at fast economic growth, job creation in the formal sector and stabilizing the economy. However, in 2001, GEAR failed because of a number of reasons, some of which including your poor quality of the houses constructed and increased unemployment, and obviously your rural areas did not have access to piped water. Another strategy would be your industrial development zones, your IDZs, and these are going to be your special zones near ports, airports to attract foreign investment and boost exports. The next strategy would be your accelerated and shared growth initiative for South Africa, which was started in 2006, right? And it planned to halve poverty and unemployment through faster economic growth. Now it had the following objectives. The first was the development of better infrastructure. Next was the promotion of economic growth. And it then was basically providing quality education and improving the skills of people. We have your special economic zones, so your SEZs. And these are going to be areas with tax incentives and support to attract industries and investors. And the last strategy would be your National Development Plan, so your NDP. And this was basically a long-term vision, right, to about 2030. And that was focusing on reducing poverty, inequality, and creating sustainable jobs. So now we're looking at your industrial centralization and decentralization. So industrial centralization is basically when your many industries are going to be grouped together in one area. So what are some advantages of your centralization? Firstly, you can have your economies of scale. That means that industries close together are going to reduce costs of production, transport and distribution, right? Secondly, you can have your job opportunities. So concentration of industries are going to create many jobs in one area. Thirdly, infrastructure development. So roads, electricity and water supply are all going to improve where your industries cluster. Your fourth advantage will be support services, so access to banks, training institutions, suppliers, and repair services. Fifth would be knowledge and skills sharing. So workers and companies are going to benefit from being close to each other and other industries. Your sixth advantage would be export hubs. So centralized industries near ports like Durban, Cape Town are going to improve your trade efficiency. And seventh, you can have your market growth. So consumers and other businesses are going to be nearby, and that's going to increase demand for certain goods. Now, just like we have advantages, we also have your disadvantages of centralization. Now, your first issue is going to be overcrowding. Now, too many people move to industrial areas, right? And that's going to cause housing shortages, it's going to cause congestion, and it's going to cause your informal settlements to rise up as well. Your second disadvantage would be pollution, right? So air, water and land pollution are all going to increase where your many industries are going to be concentrated. Thirdly, you're going to have your overdependence. So the economy relies too heavily on one area. So when the economy is going to rely too heavily on one area, if it is going to decline, it's going to affect the whole country. The fourth disadvantage would be inequality. So rural and peripheral areas are going to be left underdeveloped. You're going to have your traffic and infrastructure strain. So too much pressure on roads, electricity and water systems. You're going to have a high cost of living. So that means your rent, your food and services are all going to rise in industrial hubs. You're going to have labor issues, right? So strikes or unrest in one area can halt production nationally. And obviously number 8 would be your uneven spread of wealth. Now, industrial decentralization is going to be when industries are moved out of cities to smaller towns or rural areas. So what are some reasons to move out of urban areas? Now, these are going to be known as your push factors. So here's a very nice table that's going to give you the reasons to move out of urban areas, right? So your push factors. Again, please feel free to pause the video and take a screenshot, or you can just pause the video now to read it. And this is the next table that you are welcome to take a screenshot of. And these are going to be the reasons to move into your rural area. So these are going to be known as your pull factors. So now let's look at your IDZs, so your industrial development zones. Now in this video, I'm not going to include every single one. I'm just going to give you the definition I'm going to give you what they offer, and I'm going to give you examples of them, right? If I am going to include all of them, this video is going to end up being 2 or 3 hours long. However, I will make a separate video focusing on each and every single one, right? So firstly, what is an IDZ? These are going to be a special industrial areas near airports or harbors that are going to attract investment by offering benefits to industries. So what do IDZs exactly offer? The first would be world-class infrastructure. So there's going to be modern roads, utilities, communication networks, and reliable services to support industries and attract tenants. Secondly would be your proximity to transport hubs. So it's going to be located near airports, harbors, or railways, making import and export of goods faster and cheaper. Thirdly, you're going to have your tax incentives. That means that companies are going to benefit from reduced taxes or special allowances, which will lower your business costs. You're then going to have your customs and duty benefits. So businesses in IDZs can import raw materials and export finished products with fewer restrictions and reduced tariffs. You're going to have your cluster opportunities. So industries working in similar sectors are going to be grouped together, and that's going to allow them to share resources and knowledge. You're going to have your job creation incentives. So support is going to be given to companies that employ and train local people, helping reduce poverty. You're going to have your investment support. So government and development agencies are going to provide guidance, funding options, and simplified regulations to attract investors. And some examples of IDZs would be Coega, so that's going to be near your Port Elizabeth. You can have your East London IDZ, your Richards Bay IDZ, and your OR Tambo IDZ. So now let's take a look at your spatial development initiatives, so your SDIs. Now these are going to be government programs that are going to focus on developing specific geographic areas with high economic potential by improving infrastructure, attracting investment, and creating jobs. Some key objectives of SDIs include, firstly, to promote regional economic growth. So it's going to boost development in targeted areas with untapped potential. It's going to attract investment, so it's going to encourage both local and foreign investors to develop industries. It's going to create jobs, so it's going to provide employment opportunities in chosen regions. There's going to be the development of infrastructure, so there's going to be improved roads, rail, ports, and communication systems to support industries. Another objective would be to encourage exports, and that's going to focus on industries that can earn foreign exchange through exports. And you're going to have your reduced inequality, which is going to spread development to your less developed regions instead of just focusing on major cities. And here's an example of some SDIs in South Africa. And that's it for today, guys. I want to thank you so much for watching. So I tried my best to make this section as simple as possible and as short as possible, although the video is quite long. In terms of SDIs and IDZs, I will make videos focusing on each one separately. So in that way, you don't have to go through each and every single one. You can just focus on the one that you need to know, right? So again, I want to thank you so much for watching. All the best for your exams. Stay cool, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.